Not very sure.
I'm not sure because I hadn't planned to be on the show this morning. I had some work I was doing upstairs, but sometimes people get delayed or prevented from coming to the show, so I've stepped in. But yeah, always glad to be here.
Absolutely. I mean, with even the time that you give to the This Morning team, you are always on top of things. You finish your news on time, and 8 o'clock sharp, people need to watch the QTV news. How do you juggle all that together?
It's you try and structure your day. I'm one of these people who I used to literally have a written to-do list, and then I would tick things off as they were done. And so you do the same. People don't know that sometimes we're working on a news story in terms of its editing right up till the last minute of the news, and you have to make sure everything is right. I hate getting people's names wrong. We all make mistakes, and sometimes some of the mistakes do appear on screen, and people very naughtily kind of photograph them and they go viral. But it's I used to do the same, but I don't anymore because anybody can make a mistake.
Well,
so.
I think it happens even to bigger media houses.
It
happens to
my colleagues,
the likes of Al Jazeera
and the BBC. I used to. So in fact, I've stopped now. On the BBC, I used to send them,
the errors.
every day. I used to send the errors to them. I've got other stuff to do now.
But there are other things that it's just common sense. If they are talking about a particular story and you've seen maybe a spelling error on the screen scrolling, you will definitely understand this is definitely a spelling error. And everybody makes mistakes.
Well, just to kind of enforce and reinforce that point about everybody makes mistakes. When Pedro Sanchez was here recently, the Spanish Prime Minister, on his own YouTube page, they put up the video of his visit to the Gambia.
Yeah.
But all of the audio that accompanied it was about him talking about the Russia-Ukraine war. It had nothing to do with the visits to the Gambia. It was an error. I sent them a message, and I think they corrected it a couple of days later. But it was on there for at least 2 days, where it had all the pictures from Gambia, but the audio that they'd sort of attached to it had nothing to do with his visit to Gambia. It was all about Russia-Ukraine. So mistakes can be made.
Yes, mistakes can be made all the time. People sometimes take advantage of little things and start talking about. But once they talk about a particular media house making bigger mistakes, know that you're doing a wonderful job because people expect you shouldn't make a mistake.
One guy was criticizing us, and he kind of shot himself in the foot.
Yep.
And he said, "This is why I stopped watching QTV."
Oh.
I said, "But you've just commented on a story we've done.
Oh!
So you must have been watching to comment on the story, because you're actually commenting on one of our stories.
You are untying someone and tying yourself.
You're just putting, it's like, come on. Just making a nonsense of the whole thing. So, yeah.
Some people will tell you, I will unfollow this page, or they will comment the page.
And they keep
the
commenting.
page is unfollowed,
yes,
at some point. Yeah, so we have our African code.
I think you better read it for me.
The sun does not forget a village just because it is small.
Aye, cool. This is the kind of flip side of the rain. The rain doesn't fall on one man's
one roof,
one roof or one man's door.
These people are wise.
We are all blessed by the sun or cursed by it, because if it's too hot, we complain. As happened recently, I remember one day anybody who went outside of our office would come back staggering, and you think, the heat. I think that day was something like 33, 34 degrees or something, just quite recently, or just a few days ago I'm talking about. And this was in the rain season, but it didn't rain that day. And not only did it not rain, but it was really hot. And so, yes, across the land, almost everybody, because this is a small country, would have felt the warmth or the heat of that particular sun. So, yes, it's kind of like, the blessings of nature don't necessarily fall on one person. And you could say the flip side, when it rains here, it rains for everybody. The farmers jubilate and celebrate, and those of us who have to drive through mini lakes of water on some of our roads, we're not so happy. It's the same rain, you know, and so yes, you do get
exactly.
that. You get that. But what's your take on it?
Yes, talking about the heat, most people complain. Few months back, I read an article about the people of Pakistan, the people of India. In fact, some of them died due to heat
many
stroke.
people died, yeah.
You know, at some point, those areas are extremely hot to that extent.
50 and above, which is unimaginable.
And we complained here. With 37, we complained.
Yes, well, I've said to people, you will never hear me complain. There's a reason I left Europe and moved to Africa. And it wasn't because
it's for the weather.
It's for the weather. so
why should you complain?
You're not going to hear me complain. I mean, the weather was a huge factor. I'm not somebody who rejoices in snow or ice and all that nonsense. It's just not for me. Some people, that's what they like. It's their thing, to each his own or her own. But it's never been for me, which is why when I was a student and I could afford it, I would take 2 holidays a year, coming back to Sierra Leone mainly. And then in the 90s, I would come to Sierra Leone and to the Gambia on the same holiday. So I'd spend 2 weeks here and 2 weeks in Sierra Leone, because I wanted to be somewhere warm or
exactly.
somewhere hot,
yes.
to be exact. so yes, you know, almost no matter how hot you know, there are times when it's unbearable. You're in the heat, and then the lights go off, and so you can't switch on your fan, and it's like somebody just poured.
Well, so that's the problem. You know, I was talking.
That's not pleasant.
Yes, it's like this conversation is connected. I was talking to Yusufa Toure and Gabu yesterday.
Yes.
You know, when we finished the program, as I was walking past through the studio door, the AC was so cold to an extent, and I said to them, "Wow, those living in Europe at this time, this is the kind of cold they feel. I mean, it's crazy. I can't live there." So one of them said to me, it's a matter of choice. I think it's Gabu or Yusufa.
Right.
Someone said it's a matter of choice. Maybe you don't want to live there, but other people want to live there. You can wear your coat, you can wear anything. But imagine something that is cold to an extent that it will even snow ice.
Exactly. It's colder than that. I mean, in 2009, I went to visit some Gambian friends in Malmö, in Sweden. And I got to see most of the country because I took the slow train, which took 7 hours because of the number of stops that it made from Stockholm to Malmö. And I saw, as we went along, the kind of changing terrain, the ice, fields covered in snow, and in some places it was so cold it had frozen over. And I thought, oh, I hope it's not like this when I get to Malmö. In fact, it was. It had snowed, and the snow had actually turned to ice, and people were slipping and sliding on the pavements. That stuff is not for me. It was bitterly cold. It was bitterly cold. Yes, I was wrapped up, but no matter how wrapped up you are, it's, you know, it's like you can't even take stuff. You know, you wrap a scarf around your face because the wind, you know, and chill factor was so intense that it was unpleasant. But some people, that's what they like. In fact, that's what they know. So some it's choice, some it's necessity. It's where they were born and where they live. They didn't choose to be born there.
Now let's imagine with all that situation and that condition, you worked very hard in that cold weather, and you sent your money to your family back home, and they mess up with all that money.
Well, not everybody has an unpleasant experience with that. Some people send money and the family back home might buy a vehicle and start running a taxi, a commercial vehicle. They might start a shop or they might build a house. So not everybody sends money and the money ends up being squandered. It's not always the case. I mean, for many people, it's a good experience of you know what happens with the money. Having said that, we have many tales of people who've sent money and they were deceived by family members. Money can be very tempting to some people, and they will do things that they never thought they would do. So they're telling you, I'm keeping your money safe, I'm doing this, I'm investing in it, and when you come, there's nothing there, it's all gone.
Experience.
Yeah, so it's some people have had quite a bitter experience, but for many of us, and the reason we keep sending money is because we feel an obligation, and the money is put to good use.
True.
Might be paying rent, school fees, whatever, just living. Yeah.
The sun does not forget a village just because it is small. Yeah, so it's telling you nature's favor is fair.
It's
I mean,
distributed to everybody.
Yes, it's distributed to everybody. You know, let's talk about the wind. You know, maybe you will not be deprived of breathing in fresh air because your nose is small. It's another proverb. I can create my own proverb.
You've just
because your nose is small doesn't mean you cannot breathe in fresh air.
The air is there for everybody.
You understand? It's there for anybody. Your nose might be big, it might be small, it might be medium, it might be bigger. But you still.
You know why I'm laughing? when we were younger,
yes.
If you had somebody whose nostrils were extra big,
yes,
they used to get teased that they're taking more than their fair share of the air that was meant to be for everybody. But that was one of
but
those
at some
jokes.
point, even if your nostrils are big as you know, you still take that. A minimum that can satisfy you.
Of course.
Oxygen.
The oxygen.
You understand? So it's telling you nature is very fair.
Indeed.
You know, it is distributed accordingly.
Sure.
You know, it's telling you it's not the human being that decide on certain things. Mr. Ade, if at all I was the one, you know, that decide on what amount of oxygen you breathe, maybe at some point I'll start charging you.
Well, this is it.
You start paying.
And I think the Jamaica many reggae songs have this refrain that, you know, if life was a thing that money could buy, the rich would live and the poor would die.
True.
You know, it's a kind of similar thing.
It's connected.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll take a short break. After the break, then Mr. Momodu Mboj will be joining us on the program. I laughed because he gave me a strict warning yesterday.
On the program?
No, not on the program.
Oh, when you were off air?
Off air.
Oh, dear me. I hope now that you've told the viewers.
He put all his rules and terms and conditions.
You're going to tell us what those terms...
I am not the one that, forced him to come on the program now. Not me.
I'm sure he was
I don't have any problem.
Mr. Mboj is a professional. I'm sure he's coming of his own volition.
So we'll take a short break. After the break, we'll be back.
Inshallah.
Looking for internet for your free videos, pictures, chats, work, and school projects? Think Free Night Browsing. QCell's Free Night Browsing lets you browse the internet for free. Oh yeah. Get a data SIM, recharge a minimum of $500 and enjoy free browsing after 24 hours from midnight to 6 a.m. every night for 30 days. QCell, Sunyubus. We innovate, others follow. It's happy time. Get 50% off all calls to any network. Enjoy calls every day to any network from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Is it too good to be true? QCell. We innovate, others follow. As the fastest growing GSM company in the Gambia, QCell has the widest 4G plus coverage in the country. 3 times faster internet speed than our competitors. So switch now and dial *335# and enjoy what true 4G feels like. QCell, Gambia's trusted network.
If you're just tuning in, this is QTV This Morning. I am Ibrahim Masuri Balde. We are back after the break. We've already dealt with the African proverb, but unfortunately for us, we should have here, at least at the other side of the proverb, Mr. Mboj would have at least given us a perfect interpretation of the African proverb.
But unfortunately, we're now onto the newspaper review.
Unfortunately for us, we'll go straight.
And he's having a laugh. A perfect interpretation.
Yes.
What does that mean? There's no such thing.
We believed you will always come up with brilliant ideas when it comes to
this
the
is
proverb.
true. This is
Let's
true.
move on.
Yes. So what we do now, let's take a look at the stories. We've received an unconfirmed, report that the former mayor of KMC, Yankuba Koli, passed away, allegedly.
And from where did you get this?
It was sent to our
Page.
Yes, to our page. And the reason why we're saying unconfirmed, we want to make sure we establish the real fact. Now, let's take a look at the stories making headline. Mr. Momodu Mboja, I wanted to give you the honor to read out the newspapers.
But I haven't got the...
Unfortunately.
You seem to be smiling because is there an interesting headline that has caught your fancy? Perhaps?
National Alliance for Change Coalition unveils vision for 2026.
Yes, this is one of these words that Gambians seem to don't know whether they should take, whether they should be some Gambians exactly, whether it should be they're pronouncing it between the English and the French. If you're speaking English, the word is alliance. It's alliance, not alliance. You just said it again.
Let's take a look at this. When you talk about competition,
yes,
competition. There are a lot of pronunciation. People pronounce differently.
Yeah.
You
Competition
understand?
is competition.
Although there are also
but
facts,
alliance is alliance.
There are other words that they have their real pronunciation that should be pronounced, like the alliance you're talking about.
And the one that really annoys me here in the Gambia, Mr. Mboj can probably guess. 90% of people use the word temporal.
Temporarily.
No, they don't say temporarily. In fact, which is what they should say. They
Temporal.
say temporal. And temporal, Aliu Jallo in the control room is probably laughing his head off because it's the example I always use. They use temporal when they mean temporary.
Temporarily. But
Not temporarily, just temporary.
Just temporary.
This is a temporary measure. You see it in ministerial press releases.
Yes, exactly. Sometimes I think it's been lazy to complete
a lot of the
word
time. Yes.
or something.
Yes.
And there's a word that people use. Recently, I realized, I think, is it Mr. Boch who rectified me on the word or something, but I forgot the word. We've been using that, and I've been hearing people using that word. And all these years, we've been thinking that word is correct.
Well, temporal is one of those. And the reason I go on and on about this is because not only it's so far from what it means. Temporal is the opposite of spiritual. That's what temporal is. It doesn't mean something that's for a short term. But I hear people who are intelligent people using temporal. It is not the same as temporary.
Solution.
It's a temporal solution. No, but anyway, I digress.
All right, so let's take a look at this team is talking about Vision 2026 again. I'm pretty sure they are talking about the elections.
Of course, for anybody who's outside of the Gambia, and the next round of presidential elections will be in 2 years' time, in 2026. And of course, it's good to start planning. If you are a political party and you have a plan, you have an agenda. But, since I've been here, I'm not convinced that many of the political parties actually go to the people with, this is our manifesto, this is what we're all about. They simplify things because it makes it easier to get across to people. When you looked at it the last time, we said it in many of the discussions, a lot of the parties were saying essentially the same thing. I want to make things better for all Gambians. I want there to be better health, better schools, better roads,
network,
better
electricity.
This is it. It's very, very simplistic and simple. So you don't get a kind of ideological battle when it comes to the sort of parliamentary cycle. And I suspect it'll be the same the next time around, sadly. They all have their manifestos.
Exactly.
But how many of even their own members have read it?
One thing about me, I don't bother myself going through party manifestos because...
So what do you vote on?
Because for me, I believe the UDP manifesto, the NPP manifesto, the APRC manifesto, the GDC manifesto, all these things, you know, they will be somehow similar at some point, you know, because they know what the people are crying to them.
Hungering, thirsting for.
You understand?
Yes.
So that's where they will use that advantage, I mean, to grab these people. So I don't go through manifestos because I definitely will know what they will definitely
You're a
put
very
on
cynical man.
The last time, did you vote? The last presidential
Don't tell us who you voted for.
But
No,
did
no,
you
no.
vote?
I'm not gonna tell you
That's
who
it.
I
Did you
voted.
vote?
No,
I
did you vote?
You voted.
You
Yes.
voted.
What
That's all.
did you base that on?
Yeah.
What did you take into account to decide which of the candidates to vote for?
Be careful,
I
otherwise you
listened
will
to-
give away.
I listened to my party leader's manifesto.
Okay, okay.
I listened to it.
And what did she
I
say?
didn't.
What
I
did
didn't
she-
bother
what did she
myself.
say?
I didn't bother myself going through reading the whole manifesto, but through his campaigns on radio and television, I listened to what he said.
A man
Your
who
party
is
leader.
literate.
So that really means that the manifestos are irrelevant.
Which is kind of what he was
That's
saying.
essentially what you're
That's
saying.
what he
I
was
understand
saying. That's
because
what he
I
was saying.
still know
Yes.
those are. If you are voting for your party leader here today, you don't have to. I mean, so many people don't vote based on manifesto.
No, because what's interesting is...
There should be an added advantage.
Well, you said something. You said that one of the reasons you don't read manifestos is essentially they're
They're
all
all
saying the
similar.
same thing. So if they're all similar or even the same, similar or the
Some
same...
might be better than others.
That's the point I was going to come to.
Some might be better than
How
others.
do you choose that this is the one? This is the one.
Yes, but in implementation too, you know, I believe my party leader would be able to implement certain things.
I see.
You
Right.
understand?
Yes.
I know many people are wondering who did he vote for.
No, I don't think.
I won't tell
I don't
you.
think they're wondering. I think
I
they've
won't
probably
tell
guessed
you.
already.
So are
But,
you
yeah.
fascinated about manifestos?
What does it mean to be fascinated? It's not about fascination. It is simply a matter of reading it and
Really?
seeing what they're saying. The whatness of programs, that's one thing, but how are you going to do it? I tend to
We don't
focus on
question.
how are you going to do it?
But we
And
don't
then-
question.
If people watching QTV, they will know that when they were doing the nominations and people were going to register to stand for president and so on, for many of them, I asked my reporter to ask them the simplest possible question. And do you know what that is? Why should anybody vote for you? Many of them could not answer it in any coherent way. Which was, so if I'm watching, I'm going to say, well, I'm not going to vote for you because you can't even answer that question. You've put yourself up for elected office. And when it came to the National Assembly, I mean, it was even worse. I mean, there were people who had no clue. And they were making statements about what they were going to do when they got elected, when it would be completely out of their power.
You know, something happened to me during the councillor election. I woke up in the morning and I didn't even decide who I'm gonna vote for.
Because you hadn't read the...
You know, I went to the ballot box and I don't know how it happened. I just dropped it somewhere and
Oh,
I left.
my word.
That's
I
what
would
I-
never admit such a thing.
That's what I did.
I guess
Because at
it's
some
kind of-
point, okay, this is councillor election.
Yeah.
But it depends whether my previous councillor, whether I am happy.
Well, I was going to say,
You understand?
do you not, for example, if you live in an area where somebody was competing again and they were seeking re-election, would you not, as somebody who works in the media, would you not question them? Well, why should I vote for you again? What did you do? What were your achievements? It's a simple enough question.
No, we've seen, we lived there, so we know whether they've achieved or not. Our problems, whether they're addressed or not.
But sometimes...
It's complicated, Mr. Ade.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Well, with this one, there are different levels of complexity.
Yeah,
I prefer
quite.
to use complex than complicated.
Yeah.
And it's not always about your own impressions. Try to look at the objective facts. We are just too caught up in our own subjectivity, thinking that that is the reality. No, it isn't. Your impressions of things do not necessarily reflect the reality of the thing.
Which is what we always
Look
push
into
for on this
look
program.
at the thing itself.
Where
Learn
somebody-
to look.
Yeah, you're right. Because somebody will make a statement on here, and I will say to them, "What are the facts? What is the
Exactly.
data? What are the statistics that support what you have just said?" So we always push for that. And that's what we should, because you might have the impression that this person has done nothing, but when you ask him or her going for the council, they might list a whole bunch of things that didn't happen in your immediate area, but maybe in the wider community, they might have achieved a lot. So don't just go by, oh, it's my impression, and that's a failing. And that's why, here you don't get the sense of people holding people to account. In Britain, every week, an MP, Member of Parliament, will have a surgery where people can come, and you don't necessarily have to have voted for them, but they just have to be the MP for your area. You can go there and you can ask them anything you want, and they make themselves available, and they give them time off, Fridays and so on, so they can have surgeries, and they don't have to go to Parliament. None of them. They can all go to their constituency, because obviously it's a big country, and people can go from Westminster. You go back to your constituency, you hold these surgeries, and some will hold them on Fridays and Saturdays, because if they have a particularly big
Let's go back to questions put to some of the candidates during the presidential election. Most of them, when you ask them, why do you think we should vote for you? All they will tell you, look at the situation of the country. Yeah. The way the people are living, low standard when it comes to education, healthcare, you understand? Security, those are the things that they point at. So I think it goes beyond that. At some point, we need to hear things that will definitely encourage these people, the masses, to vote for you.
Yeah.
But they all have the same trend and pattern of convincing people.
Yeah, if you look at the countries in the Sahel, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, I follow them on Twitter, X as it's now called, and Facebook. And what they do every day, and I mean every day, they post between 10 and a dozen things about the work that they are doing. They're trying to convince the public that yes, we might be a military junta, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. And so you'll see them going to schools, to hospitals, to clinics, to the communities, taking part in sporting events. They are doing more than many civilian governments, elected governments are doing in terms of messaging, in terms of getting their message across, Mr. Mboj, because, they realize the power of the media, and they're using the media. And of course, I've said it 100 times on here, Mamadi Doumbouya in Guinea-Conakry probably has the best YouTube channel of any African leader currently. And this guy, he goes for a bicycle ride, and he takes 4 camera operators with him. They film him from every angle, just riding half a mile from the presidential palace and back. And then he posts it, and then he talks about all the infrastructure work he's doing, and all the contracts that are being negotiated. He not only has them live, the re-signing of the new contracts, but he posts them on his website so people can read what is in the contract. So he's being open, he's being transparent. How many elected presidents are being that clever?
Can do that.
And so come November, when he's due to announce whether he's going to stand again, I'm willing to bet anything.
He's going to win.
He's going to stand. No, not that he's going to win. That he probably, but he's going to stand. He's been kind of shaky about it, but come on now, it's like, I think.
Well, with all those actions, we all understand where he's driving at.
Yeah.
You understand? These are things that... Now let's move on to another story. Same-sex offenders to get 5 years imprisonment.
I heard the debate yesterday. I don't know whether you caught it, Mr. Mboj, in the National Assembly. And yeah, like many African countries, we have these kind of laws. and so I heard somebody saying in the debate, because it kind of caught my ear, and I looked up, and he was saying, what about men holding hands and so on? And one of them said, look, in Africa, that's very common. He said, you'll see men holding hands, you'll see women holding hands. It doesn't mean that they're homosexuals. He said, so, we need to be careful. He said, and then they were saying that, the punishments that we're putting in the books have to be commensurate with whatever the act is. And so, yeah, seem to have got general support, so it will probably pass and it will become law. But like I said, you'll find the same in many African countries. They have very, very strong laws about homosexuality. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. The bit that I caught yesterday was where the Attorney General, Minister of Justice, was making a distinction between indecent exposure
that's right.
and the
yes.
actual homosexual act and all the rest of
That's
it.
right.
This is really our reality. Perhaps the liberal wing would want to liberalize whatever.
I'm not sure we have one in the Gambia when it comes to things like that.
So this is really what the thing is.
Yeah.
The people just don't like it. We're against that.
Yeah,
so that will be reflected in the laws.
Yeah.
Never mind what anybody says. It's just the way we are. They tend to call it being homophobic.
Yeah.
But that word is so freighted with the whole cultural way of looking at things. So
yes. It's not that, but
let's see what will happen.
Yeah, I think the law will pass without objections.
A very interesting question here. Can PDOIS, UDP, GDC come together in 2026? These are the for a coalition. I mean, I've been hearing.
I've said it myself.
Yes. Can there be a very strong coalition for 2026?
I've said it myself. I mean, here in the Gambia, had there not been a coalition, Yahya Jammeh would still be in power. And so people who once thought that they would never come together as one did so, and they were able to defeat him through the ballot box. It's not out of the bounds beyond the bounds of reason that if President Barrow puts himself up again, that there's a coalition of, like they said, common interest in wanting to oppose him. They'll come together, and it might happen.
Exactly.
It might happen. So
absolutely. Yes. Yes. Yeah. I mean, possibility. Boy, they tell you pigs might fly, but how probable is it? That's the key.
It's theoretically.
So when we go back to 2016, for instance, we were like standing on the precipice. So it was much easier then for the coalition to form a coalition.
Sure.
Never mind their differences, nobody cared. Never mind the agenda, nobody cared. There was just one item.
Yes.
Jammeh out.
Yes, that election was not fought on manifestos.
No, it wasn't at all. This time, I am not sure whether we have reached that threshold.
Yeah, quite.
That would force the coalition to come together.
Yeah.
Now, looking at these parties, who would lead?
That is going to
be very interesting. Unless you have that overriding pressure, that overriding need to come together,
like 2016,
like 2016, an existential situation.
Exactly, absolutely,
yeah. The Gambia, small as it is, has more political parties than Sierra Leone, which is much bigger, because so many people want to lead their own political parties. So the thing of standing down or standing back for somebody else to be the leader. It's going to be very difficult.
Well, let's go back.
And even the ideology. Yeah, I think that PDOIS, they've got an ideology.
Yeah.
Exactly.
How would it align with others?
The others?
Because some of their members might be upset if they got into bed with some of these parties and saying, well, they're so different. Why are we joining them just because we have it?
But Mr. Ade, I don't think the difference will matter much. Let's take a good example of 2016. I mean, PDOIS joined UDP, and there was a bigger coalition.
It seems as if you were not listening. There was a priority.
Exactly.
That really necessitated to just paper over, the differences. That was only one thing.
Get it.
If at all,
full stop.
If at all it matters to them to that extent, I mean, it's still going to be a priority for them to come together. They can put their differences as well.
Yes.
But let's take a look at the GDC. In 2016, GDC, it's the party that damaged former President Yahya Jammeh. You understand? Mama Kande was a member of the APRC. At some point, he was even a National Assembly member under the APRC ticket. But at some point, he got a lot of connection within the APRC. But at some point, when he established GDC, he took most of the APRC members to GDC.
He took a chunk with him, yes.
So he got quite a lot of votes. For a new party coming into election for the first time, getting that number of votes. Imagine his votes were given to former President Yahya Jammeh. We won't be talking about President Adama Barrow today.
Possibly, but now go forward from from then to where we are now. How did they do in the last election? In the last 2 elections, not so good. So, you know, it's
but
because the times are different. The times are different, and the objectives of the parties are slightly different. I'm not sure the common cause is as great now as it was then. Let's get rid of Jammeh. I'm not convinced, but theoretically, as I said at the beginning, it's possible. But as Buj said, pigs might fly. You know, it's unlikely.
And we've sort of touched onto that. Mama Kande tapped into a mood. You see, great leaders do not invent issues, they tap into something. Donald Trump didn't invent anything, he tapped into something. We're seeing it all over the West.
Well, this is it, and the mood that Donald Trump tapped into was the rise of China. Suddenly America and Americans were scared that their world dominance was about to be wiped away by China. And he then started to make America great again. Americans have this kind of very fragile thing. Reagan did the same thing to get elected. I will make us into a great power once again. They've always been a great power, but they kind of always, every now and then, convince themselves that they're not when they see a threat that's rising. And the threat you know, was you know, for Trump was China, the rise of China.
Absolutely. So with Mama Kande as well. Remember that 2016, 2017 was in the elections. You didn't get what, 17%?
Yeah,
17%.
Stuff like that.
7
And then in the National Assembly afterwards, GDC had 4 or 5, you know, candidates in there. But you've seen gradually how it fizzled out, especially with the rise of NPP. So it just fizzled out. So be careful how you judge these things. When you tap into something, yes, it might lift you for a while, but you better have more, much more than simply the mood of the people. What do you add on to it? So there was nothing added, so you just frittered away.
Trump couldn't get elected for a second time.
Absolutely.
He won the first time. Second time, you know, thus far he's a one-term president, and he may still be a one-term president for all the fact that he's tapped into a kind of American mood. Yes, but people are thinking, well, there's other stuff that's of importance to us rather than us just making America great again.
Let's see what will happen. 2026 is in 2 years to come.
What was the vision? Is it the National Alliance? They've got a vision? Vision 2026. So what is it? What
I guess we're not going to get it from. We'll have to read it when we get upstairs.
We'll have to dig into that and know what's their vision.
And what is this National Alliance? That's a new party.
It's sort of a new party.
A coalition of like-minded people.
Well, there was a time, I mean, well, I don't need to reveal that on a program.
Okay.
Someone
in Sierra Leone, they had the NGC, National Grand Coalition. And they got.
I don't need to. All right. More Cuban health professionals arrive, you know, in the Gambia to cure, save lives. I mean, the Cuban doctors have been friends of the Gambia for many, many years. I mean, you know, you go to our hospital, the Polyclinic, the Royal Victoria Teaching Hospital. You meet a lot of them. You know, they've been here, and I think they've been doing very well. I mean, in the health sector.
They have a good reputation across Africa. I saw a report in South Africa where one of them, after the time ended, he ended up staying in South Africa because he said, you know, he loved the country, but also because he was earning a lot of money, which he wasn't when he was obviously working as a kind of volunteer doctor for the Cuban government. But they've been here for decades, and they've been doing great work, and long may they continue to come. Also, what we've seen, of course, there's currently a team from China, and they're here. And this Friday, they'll be doing some of their outreach treatment of people who work for the Gambia Immigration Department. So the Cubans, yes, we welcome them, certainly. Yeah.
Absolutely, and maybe we should do much more than that. Welcome them. And how did they do it?
Yeah, quite.
Little Cuba.
Yeah.
All the difficulties, in the backyard of the U.S. and they've had the sanctions.
Sanctions that's still 60
absolutely.
years.
Now they can export healthcare.
Yeah,
That's essentially what they're doing. It's a remarkable story.
It
Can
really
we learn how they did it and we begin to do it for ourselves? So instead of just depending on, this is a kind of handout, isn't it?
quite.
Handout from Cuba, from China, then it's just an extraordinary situation.
Let's move on to the connection and the conversation at the China-Africa Summit.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. And the Foreign Minister Tangara says strategic partnership with China can hasten Gambia's development process.
Well, we've seen that. I mean, what the kind of Belt and Road Initiative, what it has done for the Gambia already. But already China and others are thinking of, let's take it beyond this thing where we come here, we do infrastructure projects. What about if Gambian business people start doing business in China and Chinese investors start investing in the Gambia, building factories that then employ hundreds, if not thousands of people. So they're trying to change the dynamic with this year's forum to kind of move away from just, essentially handouts and kind of broaden it because I think they've always felt that that was not sustainable and it was kind of slightly patronizing. But they wanted, it would never be a partnership of equals, obviously. But if they open up markets to Gambian businesses and also open up the Gambia to investors, just before I came on the program, I was reading an article from 2 years ago, which said that for the first time in history, Beijing has more millionaires and billionaires than Washington. So we know now it's no longer a communist state. It's a kind of hybrid something. You don't have millionaires and billionaires in a communist state. But it's an article in, I think, Washington Times or one of those. I didn't have time to finish reading it before I came on. But yeah, so yes, the partnership has been strong and it's continued to grow stronger. And of course, as I mentioned last week, I think when we were discussing it, all of the countries that have kind of gone there, when they've issued a press statement, it said, this country supports the One China policy. So,
Absolutely. With me, my position is, we'll see. When you look at the infrastructure, obviously you cannot say much about that, but what do we want? We want to industrialize. That is really what Africa wants, the proper investment and the proper industrialization. But what we are getting from some experts right now, of course, China's pledged much more money than before, but pivoted in certain strategic areas, areas that suit China.
Of course.
Apparently, there is a kind of Western sanctions looming on Chinese goods. They will want to sell more to us than they will take. When you compare what they sell to us and our exports. That was why this time in China, President Cyril Ramaphosa said that he wanted to narrow the trade deficit with China. How would China help you there? Exactly. So they've got their strategy. Whether we have our strategy or not, I'm not so sure. We're just so hung up on this, we're getting the infrastructure and all of that. But I need infrastructure for something else. I have the roads, then we can travel, economic activity will happen. So infrastructure is an enabler.
Sure.
Isn't it? For economic development and others. It is in these areas.
Well, you know, it's even a smarter move for China. I mean, they know, okay, fine. There cannot be easy movement of goods and services without proper infrastructure. At some point, I mean, they will focus on those things. I mean, that's why you're saying the Roads and Belt Initiative, you know, to connect Africa and China.
Belt and road.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Our Momodu Lamin Choi will be like, no, it's BRI.
But you're right, because also what China wants to see is that if living standards are raised in Africa, our buying power from them is also raised. Because right now, I mean, the amount that Europe buys from China, we couldn't even come close to that.
No way.
In the whole of Africa, we can't come close to that. So they want to see that. So as Mr. Mboch says, because when you listen to the Western press now and Western politicians, what they're saying about why they're sanctioning, I mean, one of the ones I heard 2 days ago, I thought there must be a typo. But they were saying that in America, one of the, I can't remember what it was, some product that they were putting 100% tax on it from China, because the American government believes that the company that's building these, I think it was some electric cars or something, were 100% funded by the Chinese government. So they didn't think that the company was operating in a kind of level playing field. And so they thought it was heavily subsidized by the Chinese government, and so they were putting 100% duty on it, on their product, which was quite makes it almost that China will stop sending that product to the United States. So yeah, you'll get that. As Mr. Mboch said, they're probably thinking of ways that they can sanction China to clip China's wings, because they're all scared that in about 4 or 5 years' time, China will overtake America. It's inevitable, no matter what they try and do. But they're trying their best to slow China down. It's not going to happen. That bird has flown.
So whatever is going to happen in China is going to be because of the internal dynamics of that country. Because we've seen most of the countries over the years, historically, once your people begin to get rich, they want part of that political decision making. So we'll say, we remember the Soviet Union. On the eve of 1989, we thought that everything was all right. The explosion, nobody could see.
Nobody saw it coming.
So these days, we think that we understand history and the direction it's going. But when you read it, I'm not so sure. Some historians will tell you there are certain latent contradictions within. How would that be resolved? So I suspend judgment. It was like the Chinese sage, wasn't it, in the 70s? Somebody asked him, so what do you think of the French Revolution then? He said, it's a bit too early to say. You know, the Chinese got realized. The French Revolution happened in 1789.
Exactly.
So we are just too hasty sometimes.
I think we get swept
to
along
make
with
judgments. I'm not so sure that one would make any judgment.
I think part of the judgment we're making is that the change that has happened in China in the course of 50 years has not happened in human history.
Absolutely.
It's been that dramatic. I mean, one can say that without hyperbole. You can't name another country that has made such a change in 50 years as has happened in China. It's nothing short of remarkable. And that's why sometimes we forget to go back and look at history and what history has taught us, if it has taught us anything, including those of us who studied history.
So Mr. Ade, I mean, we are out of time now. I think we've exhausted everything.
Yes, indeed.
You know, thank you very much for always willing to do this with us.
Always a pleasure.
You know,
thank you.
Mr. Mboch. So at this point, we'll say tata to Mr. Ade. And the program will continue just after the break. We'll be right back.
QCell, the fastest growing network in the Gambia, now presents to you the eSIM. QCell's eSIM allows you to electronically scan a code and join the world of digital SIM cards. Customers with physical SIMs can easily switch to the eSIM as well. So rush now and get connected with an eSIM and start using the latest mobile technology with your trusted GSM operator. For more information, call our customer care on 111. QCell, Sinupus. We innovate, others follow. Terms and conditions apply.
Get a QCell SIM card for free. Yes, absolutely free. Walk into any of our customer care centers and get a SIM free of charge. With a QCell SIM card, you can get the fastest and the most reliable internet plus wide range of amazing services. So rush now to any of our care centers and get a free SIM now. For more information, call our customer care on 111. QCell Sunyubus. We innovate, others follow. Terms and conditions apply.
Have you been looking for the perfect indoor router with long-range Wi-Fi coverage and faster internet speed connecting all your smart devices? Well, we present to you the QCell Indoor Router, a router that has all you need and much more. For just $4,275, you can get 4G plus internet speed, wide coverage, and connect up to 15 devices. And that's not all. The indoor router can be used for both office and home needs. So, enhance your internet experience with our indoor router. For more info, call our customer care on 111. QCell, Sunyubus, we innovate, others follow.
With so many things to do in a single day, it's important to have a network you can trust. When there's family and friends to connect with and business calls to make, you need a network that is reliable and fast. Talk longer, browse faster, go farther, and roam wider. When your network is solid, the world is your oyster. QCell, your trusted network in the Gambia.
We are back. You're watching QTV this morning. I am Ibrahim Asfouri Balde. Now let's take a look at the last segment of this program. And we are talking about World Suicide Prevention Day. It's important for us to talk about this topic and also invite experts in the studios to take us through the reasons that leads to a person to get to that stage where you think about suicide. I mean, we've been hearing about people that committed suicide. It's not a new thing. But we want to understand what leads an individual to that extent. Because once a person goes to that level of thinking to commit suicide, know that there are a lot of combination factors. So we have Dr. Lucky Onofa, consultant, psychiatric at the Edward Francis Small Teaching Hospital, and of course Boubacar Cisse also is in the studios with us. Gentlemen, welcome to this program.
Thank you very much for having us today. Thank you, audience at home.
It's good to have you. Boubacar, we'll prefer you do this in the Wolof language.
Mandinka.
Mandinka. Okay, we are good. We are good then. Abenyadi.
Yeah, Mr. Balde.
Yes, Boubacar Cisse.
Cisse, exactly.
Okay. Bi mol nataka topic kumayari mbale kachajang. Wale mo World Suicide Prevention Day. Me ya lonko mo jamal bijambi ku jamale ka dungi kungoto pour ye suicide commit. Akumayata bake pour mole akacha. But we'll start with you. Please, can you take us through the importance of this day?
Thank you very much. I want to, first of all, appreciate the management of the QTV for this opportunity. Let me just start by saying that the program that we are doing here is on everywhere in the world. Today marks the World Suicide Prevention Day. And this program is being done everywhere, every part of the world. And we thank God that even in the Gambia today, too, we are doing that here. So what the World Health plan is that we should be able to focus our attention on suicide prevention all over the world. For us to look at what is suicide, what are the causes of suicide, and how do we prevent suicide. Because we know that in the past 45 years, suicide rate has increased by over 60%. And this suicide cut across every country, especially the low and middle income countries. In fact, about 80% of suicide are said to occur in low and middle income countries, like Ghana, like Nigeria, like even the Gambia, and other low and middle income countries. And that's why we are trying to beam our torchlight on these countries, because we must look at what should be the preventive measure we must take, because suicide is a major tragedy. Tragedy that affects the individual, affects the family, affects the society, and affects the entire country. And therefore we must be able to step up our activities in trying to prevent suicide from occurring.
Okay, all right, Bokar.
Yeah, absolutely. Comme I have on bile mulondui September on the 10 me alon ko longole me alon ko dunia e wala landi pour ka hakilo bulandi ko mol mel yalon ko ke fampa comme fampa ba prevent la nyali la comme mun simfa nyal le nyantata la comme mol mel yalon ko ke fampa mane ati na famfa nyin kake so bile mulondu amanke comme Gambia da malam bar dunia be kono lem bile mulondu me yalon ko dunia e wala landi comme nimbi lon sita mol ka mel yalon ko be jada kende abundala ani comme mol be pour ka kacha kanyo hakilo bulandi mune kati na mol ke fampa ande mune nyanta kela pour fampa nyim pour ka kunta nyado akanage kan dunia jibe nim mota da fa futa da palaso do mi alon ko alafta ka fampa ma bi amari abe tambi kan ku jamal lela mel yalon ko ma bi na mari ma koy ro soto asula da menna askeno ate futa lawto kan dum fampa siata la ando especially mel bankol mel yalon ko man development be comme ka fo mel low and middle income country comme Gambia be nyame Ghana be nyame Nigeria be nyame at least about 72% comme kemo kono taworo wula nim fula mel yalon ko ke fampa akatara wo bankol kon mel yalon ko man development so wala dunia be ba ke kan but especially in tol mel yalon ko be middle and low income country to lel fo nyanta ka cha ko wala bag kanda kantol la mol affect bage so ku jamala yatin beje me alon ko menka mol forese pour ki fampa ma bi ka cara do la as programme o nyimbitaka yes.
Doctor, of course, before we can prevent anything, perhaps it's important to understand the underlying causes. On the basis of that, we try to come with a preventative plan. So take us through some of the underlying causes.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me just start to say that suicide is the act of killing oneself. In fact, this act is deliberately perpetrated by the person with the full knowledge of his fatal outcome. The person that does it knows that he's going to die at the end of the day. Suicide is a complex issue, and there are complex factors that are responsible for suicide. These factors are better classified as risk factors. So these risk factors can operate at the individual level, at the community level, and also at some other levels. At the individual level, what are the risk factors for suicide? Or what are the causes of suicide? One of the first things that we'll talk about is that one is depression. Persons that have suffered from depression, which is a mental health condition. When people suffer from depression, they become hopeless, they feel worthless, they don't feel that there's any hope, any reason for them to live again. Yes. So once that depression has gotten to that level and the person has not received treatment, the person can become suicidal and the person may end his life in the process. Other things could be the use of substances like alcohol and cannabis and other psychoactive drugs. When people begin to use all those drugs affect the judgment capacity of the person. And if that happens, the person may become suicidal. When at the individual level too, when people begin to suffer from some acute emotional crisis in terms of financial crisis in terms of relationship crisis, job crisis, occupational crisis, all those crises can actually impinge on that individual. And when the person is not able to cope with those crises, yes, maybe he has gotten a house, he's not been able to pay for the accommodation, he has problem with the family, he's not able to feed the family, and this problem now get to a height that he's not able to cope, then the person may resort to suicide. Again, there are other factors within the society too. At times, even the media, the media has a major role to play. The media tends to glamorize details on suicide. The way they present suicide at times on the media, they make it a bit more attractive. And what people see on the media, on the TV, what they hear on the radio can be like a motivating factor. So the glamorizing presentation of suicide is another thing that can make people to want to commit such acts. Yes, also there are other factors like the means for suicide. They are readily available. They are cheap, and the people have access to them. So all those things, when they are there, when they are available, it can make someone to commit suicide. Also, you look at some other factor, like someone that has been ill, who has suffered from chronic medical conditions, like cancer, like HIV/AIDS, like tumor and other things in the body. When they have these chronic medical conditions, they will feel that the way of escape is just for them to do what? To end it up. Someone that has suffered from some major life traumas. Take for instance, someone that has been raped. He said, okay, if I've been raped by people and there's no any solution coming forth, why am I living again? So the person may also resort to committing suicide. So there are various factors. And this factor, like I said, there are multiple factors that act in concert. It's not a single straightforward cause, but multiple factors that act in concert to lead to suicide.
Yes. Just a follow up from there. When I look at my society, doctor, a lot of people can be depressed. So all of these symptoms you've named, a lot of people can be that. But what are the factors that would push you to the tipping point to actually think about suicide? It's an extraordinary thing. Even though all of us go through
some people are depressed. Exactly. At some point, everybody goes through depression to a certain level.
You are right. You are right.
But why does other people stand out to an extent of committing suicide?
Now, there are other factors apart from what I've said. Take for instance, people can have depressive symptoms. People can have some problem here and there, but we are looking at the social support system. When they have all these problems, does the family support them? Are they being supported at their place of work? Are they left alone to paddle their canoe by themselves? When all these factors are there, people that eventually commit suicide, they don't have any source of support, social support. Nobody to care for them, nobody to assist them, and they are left alone. And in that context of being left alone, the person may have no other choice than to commit suicide. Person that has difficulty, nobody has come to rescue him. Yeah, he's owing the landlord money, or he has borrowed money from the bank. He's not able to pay back, and everybody kept quiet about all this problem. So when people are into all such problems, all such life difficulties, and nobody is here to give them a helping hand, they may likely go into suicide. Yes.
Absolutely. Let's have the man intervention.
Comme I have comme ni ko suicide wala ni mo tauta comme afon le ya famfa. Ya understand. Maybe mo fa saya o buka bay. Par comme saya signal ka fadal. Ba ni ko suicide wala famfa comme ni mari afon le kuol ke me alongo. Wala suntala saya. So janim ba fala comme be nyin tankala nyaade le be mol tankala nyaade le comme pour que famfa. But nyanta gaw diamu men na folo muna fon ka sabu me atina akamu samba fo ay futa place oto ay jokonte o kay nyanta ka men ke sa wala ko men ngam famfa so ku jamal le ka sabu comme ni inata ndo la jata kende ala fanna ma fon comme mo si sasa dol soto no comme ni sondo me sasa ko dem par exemple ka me depression ma lo mba fo la man ka comme zafo sunu jawo da ni sunu jawo la ta moka. You understand? So no keta mola koma de new kadu kuyare ni kuya jawole katara amari bala. So aka afekila aka ala sino afekile ala domoro aka afekila ani mola kule fo be dunna nyoko na nyame. So mari kataro suno kono le fo aita fa futa tembe dato mi alonko amari ka jelo ko ma binde be nyin ko men kono tendal ma bi comme fam fa dron wole ben sabula pour nga nyina nyin kola. Ya onda o mu fanna kilinde me alongo asatina mo ya famfa sometimes kudol fanan sike mo le ka fo me some emotional distress in English ya understand comme jakalu ku si la mo kam me alongo dal na mari man de maro so da wa dola asa mari sambono le fo stage oto aya famfa hani sasal me alongo comme manke sonda me sasal ibini sasa dol comme bala jara sasal me alongo sasal ni nyakay aka dimo le kana nyola maybe cancer be nyama ani some chronic illness like HIV comme for example HIV be nyama mel ya lonko ya sotole hani na community kono te mol ke discriminate le mol fa kari wo hecha so hanne ani mol mel yalon ko sutiata nyola koma badi ngol ten akafu nyolo ikaje le mol ka hay mol ka nyambala so mari katare kidori nga famma abe siri nga famma so nimmo be siri nga famma nyama mol be nyambutala abe kidori wo fananka modo sa mo sabul ko men ka ande o kay say munam na badi ngolu kafu nyolo mol be nyambuda na mol be sabatana so ndam malam so fananka kul mol sabu kul tileme yalon ka modol sabu pour ye fampa so ku jamal lebeti and then sometimes fana menka fampa fana sone andi mol bul comme nka fo me ko mean of suicide comme mol ka fengol mel yukus pour que fampa sometimes aka available aka tara aka asoto ka sone yal for example even Gambia jam sometimes even kunum be newspaper do bala jibe ka fo ko asoto da mol soto da me yalon ko ya fampa so mol ka fengol mel use we have a means of suicide mol ka fengol mel use pour que fam pa aka sone ya bagel ma bi ni julu kesol because o mu si vale de me alon ka asiata na jam bagel ko me kam moje ya fo wata da ka da wulo ko no la ya fam pa so julu kesol yi da mari soto do be julu kesol la sometimes dol si poison fengota yami comme o tamo da wato soto ne ka fo ko ni sniper mol ka use bagel pour que fam pa so me alon ko comme cool mel iba amari ba yusno pour ka fampa ayda jurike sole mba wora fongolu ten ya holbe katara sotori na community ko non so fananka asoni andi mol bulle pour yalon ko me yalon ko e ka fampa so nyilla mu some of the thing de me yalon ko koma ka mol sabule pour ki fampa so pour ka prevent fanan ma bi bina auto fanan but these are some of the things that might trigger somebody and in sondo message ko dol be comme ka me schizophrenia ma bi no be mola ma bi akatara kumol le moy ke ma je ma amari si tara siri ka me auditory hallucination ma bi akatara siri ka kumol ka diama and then sometimes all hallucination it is so commanded kuma akatara diamu kaina ka fa teta nyinke so ni way of government teta fan jolon kolon ko teta nyinke sometimes people me alon ka be sasari aka kumo mira to nyalde men ka fa so ni way ku fa do ne kuma aka adiamu male katara kuma ka mari tulo
ni manyinge
exactly so fanansa amari fenge na da lo nyinga men fonye because amari na man de maro so that ka miro mu to nyale aka memmo ya ka lala so wala tina one of the thing pour ka ni suicide ni prevent comme do ku dula jamalel bulo nyanta katara nyongo ma bi ministry of health ya understand comme ani even education youth and sport mol bel nyanta ke bulo du nyobul pour ka nyin ko ni pour ka prevent ma bi in term of melialon ko ye sonde message do pour be jara ro so la nyami because some of them aka so ma bi severe depression na mari man jara lo so ata mo la den asidale a maria fampa so ma bi Mr. Mboje ya nyine ngamen na panon comme munne ka tinda mo ka da fa futa o stage ma bi comme ma bi ni kuya din aka la mol kan every time but comme ika home depression fana ay comme ay lan na bulo le soto ika mile one obeje le moderate one obeje and severe one obeje ya na so ni mo be mile one oto ma bi si no be kole ala bulle ma bi ala domoro appetite soto aka kon isolate domandi ya onda sa bon ni mo ta da fois afuta comme severe form of depression comme wo mari dal ay hana aka cool mel ke me alon ko comme aka kontaan ndi la ma bi kasi ni mole ka cha wala ka television jibo ka cool mel ka kontaan me alon ko hana sunuta ko le ka den ay kontaan so na futa da ko at the severe form of depression comme wo cool be ka so fala lo be bugana dia ko ten ya understand animal la interaction o ka tinyale ko na animal buka dunyo ko no bag so even that one wo fa damma because ma bi na mari be isolate na fam at the an isolated place comme Adam Mabeji, that can be a recipe, that can be a fertile ground for suicide. So these are some of the different factors that eventually lead somebody to suicide. Maybe around the discussion we will talk about some of the preventive measures. Comme mol nyanta ka munni munege pour ka mol melialon ko maybe ni ku ajawol belo sasa dol bela pour men nyanta kala pour si kuntu kuwol nyaata janabe futala fo wato mi yalon ko ni maria ba tala ka pampa because academy bakele because ni moya fampa community ka losle banko ka losle family ka losle ya na because ma bi amari mo kuma bale di family ko na ka ma bi dépense bondi wa exactly so aka lot of negative impact less on this society.
You know, suicide itself it affects everybody.
Exactly.
You know, once a person commits suicide, it affects your children, it affects your family, it affects everybody, it affects even your relatives.
Exactly.
You know, nobody wants to see your family member going through suicide. What are some of the common signs that someone may be struggling with suicidal thoughts?
Thank you very much. Most of the time, about 80% of people that eventually commit suicide, they would have shown some signs and symptoms. Most time, people will just take them for granted. But take, for instance, when somebody begin to say, you are better off without me, it's like I cannot cope again, it's like my head is failing me. When somebody begin to talk such or make such utterances.
If a person is speaking in parables.
In parables. If you begin to do such things, you must have to give the person more, more attention. If the person now begin to do something, take for instance, he now begin to give away his property to people, and he doesn't even want to plan for his future again, and this person now begin to isolate himself from people, and some of them may turn towards taking of alcohol and other drugs, because they say they will use that to drown away their sorrow. And if somebody begin to do all those things, and eventually, if the person now begin to, write something, what we call the suicide note, that he write it and he put it under somewhere in the house, or he put it on the media, social media, and he just put it there as if it doesn't matter, but it matters. So when you see someone that has been active, and he now begins to withdraw from social interaction, he now begins to have what we call negative utterances about himself, about the family, about the future, about the whole world, and is persistent in all those negative utterances, then it calls for a lot of vigilance, because that may be the 30 signs of the premonition to suicide. So you begin to watch the person, and if the person now begin to carry out some actions, like he goes out of the house, doesn't come back, and when he comes back, he comes back very sorrowfully. It's no more interacting with the family. When he goes to work, he isolates himself. He's talking about negative things most of the time. Then you know that this person, there's something that he has not said, and he's keeping everything to himself. Height of secrecy. Is not trying to reveal things about himself, and is trying to keep all these things. So when you begin to see all these kind of manifestations, you know that this person is harboring something. It may be an emotional distress that is not been able to ventilate or say out. So that will be a time for you to now move close to the person. And one of the first things you want to do is that you want to engage the person in talking. Engage the person in talking. Let the person ventilate his mind. It's not a time to judge the person. It's not a time to say, why are you taking like that? It's not a time to be judgmental, but it's a time to show care. And it's not the time to raise any alarm. It's a time to understand what the person is going through, and you do your counseling, but not ordinary counseling. It should also be a time for you to make appropriate referral. This person that has come out with all these utterances is going to require a professional intervention. It may be a psychiatrist, it may be a psychiatric nurse, be a psychologist. So you must not end all your counseling just at the point of either prayer or at the point of talking. But you must also ensure that this person receives the needed professional intervention.
Well, doctor, the reason, there are a lot of factors that will lead people to commit suicide.
Yes,
I mean, you see the society, we have a lot of issues. People might be going through a lot at home at some point when you get to your place of work too. I think as colleagues at a place of work too, they should play a very important role.
Exactly.
When you see your colleague develop certain characters that he or she doesn't have before,
exactly.
I mean, I think it's important for you to get closer
exactly.
to the individual.
Exactly.
But I think society's discrimination also plays a very important role in leading people to... There was a time a man said to one of his friends, I mean, I want to tell you something. And the friend said, what is it? And he explained it to the individual. The friend replied, you've destroyed your life. Next minute, the man committed suicide.
Can you imagine?
Yes.
Can you imagine?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So society plays a very significant
It's a very major role.
And then let me just slip in something there before you answer that. How prevalent is it in this country? Do you have any data on the prevalence of suicide in this country?
Yes. In most of the developing countries, the vital registrations, they are underreported because of the issue of stigma. So most time people will hide it. Nobody wants to come out that my family member has committed suicide. A lot of stigma actually go with suicide. So most of the time, when the data that we have, they are being underreported. I think in 2019, that is the last time. If you search on the internet, is when we have the prevalence there was 4.8 per 100,000 population. Normally, suicide is being estimated per 100,000 population, but the normal average is around 10.7 per 100 population. So therefore, in the Gambia, what they have here in the Gambia is even lower, far lower than what we have for the average. Like my country, Nigeria, the average is about 9.5. So it's almost twice as common in Nigeria as compared to Gambia. And there are many factors. The religious factor too. Because where people are much more religious, it is said that suicide rate is a bit lower in that kind of country. And that's good enough. We have many Muslim here, and the people abide by the teaching of Islam. So with that, the suicide rate in such community is said to be lower compared to where people just are free to practice anything and then they are up and down, So that is one thing. But be it as it is said, in 2020, 2021, 22, when I look at it, I didn't find anything. In fact, they reported zero prevalence for the Gambia. But it's not true, because since I got here, I've been here for the past 9 months, and I've seen not less than 6 or 8 people that have been suicidal. That, in fact, currently I'm still working on some of them. Most of them, they are like young ladies. And what is their problem? Some of them said that for the past 3 years, 4 years, their husbands are not here. The ones that I've seen, that the husband is either in the US or in the UK, and they have been staying with the in-laws. And at the in-laws' place, they have a lot of difficulties and challenges. Some of them have thought of suicide. And I've also seen some students who are having difficulties with their academics, and they plan to commit suicide. In fact, I've seen at least 8 cases, and we talk and we did all this psychotherapy, and by and large, they are free now. Just to say that suicide, some of the doctors that work at Indemba hospital, we talk, and they have seen some cases too that they actually, some of the cases that we see that the person just died suddenly and they died at home. Some of them, they could be suicidal cases. We feel that nobody wants to say. True. And some of the cases that they have seen there, they say somebody has taken a battery water, all this is acidic, and the person died. So that's suicide. So we have some cases like that, but they are underreported generally in the developing countries, and that could be the reason why we are having low prevalence of that in the Gambia. But I'm telling you, if we look closely, there are still some cases of people that have died, but actually they are due to suicide, but they are not properly reported. But that could be the reasons.
Absolutely.
So we have just 2 minutes.
Yes. So here now, this is Suicide Prevention Day.
Yes.
So take us to some of the prevention strategies, measures that we're going to implement.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, okay, just on the first one because of the time constraint.
Absolutely.
Yes, like I said, suicide is a complex issue. Therefore, any approach that will be used to prevent suicide must be comprehensive, must be well coordinated, and there must be some level of collaboration between the Ministry of Health, Education, Law, Justice, Labor. All of those ministries, they have to work together hand in hand. And what are we going to do? One, we are going to look at the individual level, some of the risk factors. The person must recognize, taking of alcohol, taking of all these things. It has to be prevented. Then also at the family level, let there be love in the family. Love. Let there be love. Let there be caring. Nobody should be discriminated against. Let there be no rivalry in the family, hostility in the family. Let's take everybody as one in the family. Nobody should be a lone ranger. We should be able to confide in one another in the family. It should be a confidence. Most of the people that commit suicide, they see themselves as low rangers. And when they are low rangers, they just take things impulsively.
Yes.
They actually commit suicide.
We have already run out of time, but I think this is very interesting. We'll try to schedule you. Will you be in the Gambia maybe by next week?
Yes, I'm still around.
You're still here? I'll contact you.
All
we
right.
need at least a lengthy conversation on this.
Okay.
Because suicide and mental health issues, these are things that is really affecting our people. So we need to go through this.
And have time to summarize that in.
Yes, please, quickly, just in less than 10 seconds.
Okay. Anyway, so come be focus on suicide. So Mr. Baya nyinen kamen comme munemu taman se rôle de pour niaje mo bala doy salon ko comme ni mari askeno mari amari be pare kan ka fampa so comme taman serte ye me alon ko iba falo ko ni mo nay ni ngi jabala do salon ka mariel fa gam but sometimes ma di be taman se role bondal comme me alon ko ma bi ay si kumul mo yala kon de ma bi dunia ko dunia fa na fatala ya anda sa ande ba mari jela fanan comme ate ku kela comme ate ku kala pour ala fijo comme sama kam pour ka sama nyasi ya anda sa mari be tar kumul le fo la ni jikilate ku wol dron dunia fa man na fa soto ya anda sa ma bi mari fanan be tar ka katara siri nga fama ni mol buka interaga ni mol buka du nyokon so those are some of the things and sometimes
thank you. I mean we are already going off air now. I'm almost I mean they are sending me warnings. We'll try to schedule you, doctor. We'll bring you again so that we can continue this topic because we have a lot to talk about. So thank you gentlemen for coming. Mr. Mboj, thank you very much. Viewers, this is where we're going to draw the curtain until we come here again tomorrow for another episode. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.